Hello, everyone. My name is Lionel Sander from Pembroke Publishers, and welcome to today's webinar with Kathy Lundy. It's great to have you here. Before we get started, I'll just a couple sort of technical logistical pieces. If you have any technical difficulties along the way, just put a note in the chat and just put @Lionel to start it, and I'll know it's you, and I'll get you all fixed up and squared away and back into the session as soon as possible. This session is being recorded, and you will receive an email when the recording is posted in the next 24 hours. So if you have to leave or you would like to share this particular session with someone, you will have all the information you need for that. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce our presenter today, Kathy Lundy. Based on a little bit I was seeing on Twitter and even in the chat here, I think many of you know Kathy from either personally or professionally or hearing her speak at conferences kind of in the pre-COVID days. Well, now we're moving into the brave new world, and Kathy's joining us from the beautiful province of New Brunswick, even though many of you know that she lives in Toronto. For those of you that haven't heard Kathy speak or read any of her work, Kathy is committed to inventive, inclusive teaching that impacts on student achievement. She's been an author of many books for teachers, been involved in the development of curriculum documents and videos on many aspects of learning. She currently teaches at the Royal Conservatory of Music and at OISE in Toronto. And so, Kathy, it's great to have you here today for your first session. We're really looking forward to it. So I'll pass the virtual mic over to you and we'll get started.
Oh, thanks, Lionel. And hi, everybody. I can't see any of you, and I just wish we were standing in a circle and we could see each other's faces. But this is a wonderful opportunity for me to learn about how to do this. I've got my haircut on pending because I've been in isolation for 2 weeks here in New Brunswick. But I've been thinking a lot about how to do this kind of teaching, and I don't want to be resistant to it because I realize that this is what we're all going to be facing in the next few months for sure. And I just had a Zoom call with all my colleagues at the Royal Conservatory of Music, and what struck me about them was just how professional they were. I mean, they're performers, they're opera singers, they love to do what I love to do, which is, do interactive face-to-face kind of stuff. But I was really impressed by just how they kind of professionally said, I'm going to learn how to do this. So I thought, gosh, I better figure this out myself. So anyway, it's great to be with all of you. And I do wish I could see your faces, but I have to accept the fact that I can't. And I'm going to move on and look at my slides if I can get them to work. Here we go. So speaking of faces, this is such a cheap trick, but at the beginning of the pandemic, my first granddaughter was born, my first grandchild ever, and she sort of came a month early. She kind of knew what to do. And people have always said, once you become a grandmother, your emotions, your life kind of changes. And it's so true because, I was writing the book at the time of the birth of this child and struggling with feeling quite depressed during the pandemic and what I want for her is what I want for all kids, sort of a chance to lead publicly happy and privately useful lives. And so, I decided to show you her picture and to tell you that for me, life has changed dramatically. But in this book that I've worked on in the last few months, I realized that life has changed dramatically since I first published the first edition 12 years ago. And, environmentally, things have changed. What I write about is how, the world is right at our doorstep in terms of the Me Too movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, certainly the pandemic that has taught us that wealth is certainly connected to health. And so I've decided in this webinar to just really focus in on three things that I think the book does fairly well. And there's new material in the book, certainly probably one of the lessons that I'm excited about, the most excited about, is the lesson around post-colonial Indigenous education, that I will describe a little bit later. But um, there are three aspects to the work that I'll talk about today. And one of them is about creating communities of conscience in the classroom. And I used to talk about classrooms as possibilities, and I do believe that there are uh, moments of possibilities all the time that we face as teachers. But I also think we're constantly having to have students notice things, reflect on things, become aware of their conscience, aware of their ethics, aware of what is fair for both themselves and for others. And I think that sort of is a very important foundation for this kind of work in social justice, that we're all aware of where we sit in the world, and we're conscious as teachers that in order to work towards fairness, we have to acknowledge that not all of us start off in the same place. So the beginning of the book is about how do you establish in your classrooms that idea that we are constantly checking in with one another, and we're drawing back, and we're rethinking the ways in which we see each other and we see ourselves in relationship to other. So I think that that's an important foundation for the work that we do in social justice. And I'm looking down the names of the people that are here on this webinar with me, and many of you do this work and you do it so powerfully and so well. And when I'm on Twitter, I'm so impressed by, the kinds of risks that you take as you weave social justice into your curriculum. And I see people doing that, and I support that work. And the work that I've described in this second edition focuses on various aspects such as mental illness, environmental issues, anti-Black racism, etc. So how do you do that is a crucial part of this book. And the third part is something that I feel very strongly about, that I feel that, teaching imaginatively and teaching with insight and teaching with a certain degree of passion and a certain degree of risk taking is part of the equity movement. That we cannot do the same old kind of work. That we have to, along with our children and our students, take risks in the teaching endeavor, so that we're stepping out of our comfort zone as teachers, as well as helping kids step out of their own comfort zones. So I do believe that this is a crucial piece as we begin to worry about standardized tests and online learning and zooming in on smaller things, that we have to find really creative ways of doing this. And I am somebody who is always nervous before I teach, and I was extremely nervous about this webinar, because I do think the teaching encounter has to be something where a minute isn't wasted. That you're figuring out as you go. So it's a book that explores some pretty difficult issues, and I talk a lot about the mistakes that I've made in doing this kind of work with kids and with teacher candidates, and just wishing I hadn't said certain things. But it's also a book that I hope encourages us to be hopeful. That there's nothing like teaching. We all, you wouldn't be here on a summer afternoon. I'm out looking at the Miramichi. I'd love to be in the water as we speak, but we wouldn't be here doing this kind of work, situating ourselves in front of our computer on an August afternoon, unless we had a certain degree of hope that what we're doing is making a difference in the lives of our kids. And, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I gave a speech for the Toronto District School Board principals, actually, the Toronto Board of Education principals, about how do you remain hopeful. And this great quote from a Black academic from 1899 sort of popped up in my life. And Charles Chestnut says, "Let not the shining threads of hope become so enmeshed in the web of circumstance that we lose sight of them." We can't become so overwhelmed by what it is we're being asked to do that we can't just sort of bob to the top and keep going and believe that what we do, makes a difference in the lives of kids. So, when I talk about communities of conscience, uh, I believe that it's sort of a circular kind of thing, that in terms of you acknowledge the identity of everyone in your classroom and that everyone feels valued. Everyone has an opportunity to connect with you and with each other and with the curriculum, that they know that when they walk into that classroom, they're not going to be anything but acknowledged. And I was thinking about this, as a kid growing up in Montreal, going to school, I was one of those kids that sort of sat in the middle. I wasn't very athletic. I wasn't very academic. I wasn't very attractive. I was kind of one of those ordinary middle kids. And I didn't feel acknowledged. I was only when in grade 6 I sort of uh, began to understand the value of metaphor and allegory and that kind of thing, that I drew the attention of one of my English teachers. But I'm very conscious that if we're going to talk about doing this kind of work in social justice, every single kid has to feel that you understand where they're coming from. And so that's an important aspect. And there are a lot of exercises in the book that help us figure out how to do that, so that everyone's voice is heard, that there's an ethic of hearing everyone's voice in the classroom, which can be very difficult because some of those voices are perhaps things that, we might not agree with, that we have to work through, and that kind of thing. And I talk a little bit about, kids that and experiences I've had in the classroom where I haven't wanted to hear those voices, but I know I have to work with them. And another large part of the book is looking at culturally responsive and relevant pedagogy, so that kids are aware of what that is, as well as teachers, so that we're all working towards an understanding of what is unfair for all of us and for others as well. And then the last part of the book is about action. It's not enough to just know this stuff. It's not enough just to experience these stories and met these characters or use the words of famous speakers who have been social activists. It's important for us to act on the work and to go out into the world and do something. So that's it, sort of an overview of that aspect of the book. And for me, culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy is sort of three things. Yes, I do believe that kids need to learn what is most meaningful to them. But, we need to be responsive to what it is they want to know. But then it's our job as teachers to lead them down paths where they didn't even know they wanted to know that. That's teaching. So we are teachers. We're drawing our kids in. We're finding ways to elicit from them an interest in the material so that they can respond to it. I do believe, and there's a lot of material in the book about using students' cultures and identities as vehicles for learning. And the books that I've used, the lesson plans that I've talked about, I hope are very diverse and help you see that the classroom can respond to many different kinds of needs. But the other part of culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy that's, for me, the tough part is that we all have to critique what it is that's happening to us. Why have we come into the classroom with these biases? Why have we come into these classrooms with these stereotypes in our head? Why is it that the institution that we find ourselves in isn't flexible enough for us to question what it is that is happening to us? So that is another part of this book. It's the idea that we critique, that we disrupt. We have kids coming into classes and saying, gee, I thought I understood this, but I see it so differently now because of the conversations we've had, because of the books we've read, because of the activities that we've done. And I need to know more. The other aspect is, it's a book with lots of ideas in it. So there's cooperative games that a lot of you know. I wish we could all play one right now, where kids, have an opportunity to work together, and you work quickly to get to know them and give them an idea of what the rules of the game are. I mean, when I wasn't being really facetious when I talk about circles, but I work a lot in circles as a democratic kind of way of making sure that I see everybody's face. So there's cooperative games, there's name games where we value the names of everybody no matter how they're pronounced. We learn how to pronounce them. We get that into our way of being and talking. We don't have kids change their names so that they can be understood better. We value their names and where they're from and how they got their names, and we find out the family stories, etc. There are a fair number of identity exercises too. Some of you might know them. Lay your cards on the table, where you literally lay down who you are in terms of your own identities, and what are those identities that made you feel included in the world, and what are those that made you feel as if you were not? And why is it important for us to know that there are many different aspects of ourselves that we need to validate? There's a lot of work around storytelling and having students tell their own personal stories, tell their stories of their own lives, and then enroll as other characters in the work that we do, tell a story as someone else and be validated in that way. So a lot of the work in terms of this book is about voice, student voice. There's, of course, the reading, writing, listening, speaking frame that I use. A lot of writing and roles, a lot of interviewing, a lot of storytelling. I, as you know, my work in graphic novels, I love to use images and all sorts of different kinds of poetry, emails. There's the Indigenous education work that I did in one of the lessons uses Glennis McQueen's Fuentes hieroglyphics, but I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So the student work is validated, and the voices of students are heard in the classroom work, but also in project work. And some of you know the project that I did where students from across the country, from Toronto, Halifax, and Vancouver, performed a play called Imagine a School in front of the directors of education many, many years ago. That was in 2006. And I was going to cut this from this particular edition. And my editor said no, because what those kids said, 14 years ago is as valid now. And their voice was important. Teach us, honor us, listen to us. And the other thing that those kids said, which was so important, is good teachers make all the difference in my life. And it was a wonderful project where these teachers and kids came together and talked about, how important it was to do good teaching. I also describe a project that we did, I did with a grade 7-8 class, where we had kids tell their stories of their community and use artifacts, animate the artifacts, film the artifacts, etc. It's a crazy, wonderful, artistic, nutty project where kids told stories of what it's like to be poor and sad a lot of the time, and what we need to do as teachers to be aware of those ideas, of those realities. And then finally, I have written about my research project in the 10 Ontario school boards, and about the teachers, the 30 teachers who were involved in that project, performing their stories of teaching in front of a group of education leaders, including the Assistant Deputy Minister of Education for Ontario, where they spoke about teaching and what we need to know and acknowledge the voices of teachers, the voices of what it is they know, these innovative, brilliant teachers that came together. So, some of the questions in the book are, what do I want my classroom to feel like, look like, and sound like? And, we're all lying in bed thinking about that now and wondering, how can I make this work, especially given what we're all facing? And then, what I've been doing is looking at what am I doing that's working, and then what am I doing that I just need to throw out and change, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. If it isn't working and you dread doing it and it doesn't seem to make a difference, then don't do it, and figure out, what it is that you need to do. And, that question of what overriding quality do I want to establish from the beginning of the year to the end? And, for me, it's kind of acceptance. I want to, when I walk into your classroom, I want to know that I mention, that constant beat of acceptance, that no matter what I've done or how the mistakes I've made or who I think I am, when I walk in and I'm with you and the other people, we have an understanding that everybody's going to be okay in the end. I think those are important questions to ask, and there are many, many more in the book. Teaching as an act of social justice is something that we all are involved in, and an understanding of a teacher's sense of student. How do I get to know my student, each one of them? How do I figure out, how to differentiate my classroom experiences so that each student sort of feels honored and acknowledged, so that they get a sense of self, that they emerge from your classroom feeling better about themselves. And this, of course, is connected to our own sense of self, our own feelings of self-worth, our own identities as teachers, our own worries and concerns, and our own honesty about, how we need to be supported. And one of the things that I talk about is you need to find someone who's going to support you. And then a sense, we all need to have in our work a sense of place. Where are we from? What has shaped us? What do we acknowledge? What do we understand? We all bring that with us to the classroom endeavor, and teachers do too. We all bring an understanding of and even of landscape and of just an aura. We know we need to bring our understanding of where we're from into the classroom, and find out where our kids are from as well. I talk a lot in the book about, I open the book with a huge teaching error that I made. I tell a story of, something that, kind of went horribly wrong. And I've been helped by equity educators from York University, Alison Games-Vanchente, who has, taught me these three things. And I do this with my students, that, we all have to stay engaged in the work and in the discussion around LGBTQIA, around racism, around poverty and class, around any of these issues that we're talking about. You cannot run from the room. I don't allow that anymore. We have to stay with each other, and we have to figure it out, and we have to kind of listen, and we have to speak our truth. We have to talk about what it is we know. And we have to understand that that is an act of bravery. but we have to listen to each other. And in this story that I tell at the beginning, the little boy says at the end, as he's crying, he said, I didn't understand that my words were so hurtful. And we all have done that. So we're going to experience discomfort as we do this work. But let's not, why would we are, and you have to also say to your kids, you're going to have to expect and accept that we're not going to have figured it all out by the end of the day. That this is going to be a life's project. That what we're going to talk about and do together is going to uncover certain things that we didn't know about each other, or we didn't know about humanity, and we've got to work together for the rest of the year. So when you come in tomorrow, we will pick this up, and etc. One of the chapters is on critical thinking and emotional literacy, looking at human relationships, power dynamics in books and in literature, helping kids have multiple perspectives. One of the things that I said just recently in a podcast is that, a truly educated person, I believe, is someone who is not sure of his or her answers. Like, I might be wrong, but I have this, that's what you want. You want in your kids this sort of tentativeness about learning, because these are complex and difficult ideas that evoke intense feelings. So the tentativeness is a good thing in this work. And I'm not talking about tiptoeing around the issues, but a tentativeness about not being sure, and wondering aloud, and being allowed to wonder aloud. So, of course, I'm interested in getting each of my students to sparkle in their own personal way. And, that's what we're here for, right? Eisner says that, children are born with brains, and it's up to us to make them into minds. They come in, and, we have to figure out who they are so that they just become this amazing little thing. But this is our big question. How will I nurture, support, inspire, and challenge my students to take risks so that they are indeed not knowing, but actually thinking critically, not being sure, so that they are thoughtful, critically thoughtful people. I talk a lot in the book about the Peggy McIntosh's work, the window and the door, that the window reflects all the stuff you have to learn. You open up the window on the curriculum and you bring it all in, and you teach a lot, and you reflect back to them through the mirror, their own identities, et cetera, and family situations, sexual orientation, et cetera. But for me, the door is my work, that we don't just, we're not removed from it. We get into the work. And of course, those of you who know me, we are up on our feet. We're working together. We're working in partners. We're working in small groups. We're coming back to talk about it. We're going back out into the classroom to try other ideas out. So, there's active engagement with texts and with media, that there's many different kinds of lessons and ideas that I've given you. But the idea around disruption and discussion and action is big. And, having the mentors that you need to go forth and find people who you can talk to. So as well as I realized that I didn't put the environmental issues in there. I should have. I will for my next one. But there's lessons on FNMI, anti-colonialism. There's anti-Black racism. There I use Porter's The Crazy Man as a model for mental health. There's anti-bullying work. There's LGBTQIA work. There's work around disability and poverty and class. So these are descriptions of lessons. Some of them are real lesson plans. And if any of you know me, you know that I am saying you take these ideas and you just make them your own. Please don't follow word by word what I've done. Just take them and take them into your classroom to work with your kids in your particular way, because that's what you do, and that's what I hope you'll do. So, my innovative stuff is literally making sure that our teaching is connected to equity and academic success. High expectations, those 6 E's of effective teaching, that you establish this respectful classroom, that you have high expectations, that you engage the learner, that you figure that out, that when they walk into the classroom, they know that there's going to be ways in which they're going to be brought into the experience. And then, how do you explore the material? How do you, what are the ways, are you going to make some lists, work with lists? Are you going to have them design questions? Are you going to have them interview? Are you going to have them research? Are you going to have them go away and come back? So how do you get them to explore the material? And then the key piece is, how do you extend this work? So that you go deeper into the harder issues that have no answers. And the extension is that 50. And then finally, how do you evaluate all this? How do you evaluate fairly, given that this is very kind of esoteric stuff? As well as all that, there, at the back of the book, there's 50 teaching strategies. Many of you know them. There's some new ones there that I've developed that I kind of love. And that's sort of where the book is at the moment, and these are my final questions for what kinds of supports do I need right now to help me make a difference? I mean, I can't imagine, it's 2 weeks away, and I know that we're all struggling to figure this one out. And whether we even want to go and do this is the other issue. But anyway, what do I need to read and research so that I can learn more, of doing social justice work in the classroom? And, I acknowledge at the beginning of the book that I am a white woman of some privilege. And one of the things that I encourage people to do is you need to go out into the world and speak with your colleagues who live this experience of racism, of classism, etc. You need to speak and find out and work and understand. And then finally, this is the one that I don't do too well at, but how can I take care of myself so that I can take care of my students? And I'm only learning this now. When I think of it, was just, I need to do that better. That I thought if I worked harder and stayed longer, and but you have to look after you too. And that's a really important part of this work, because it's not easy work. It requires enormous amounts of belief in yourself and in the issues, and that kind of understanding of how you want to be kind and help kids to be empathetic and understanding. And it's funny, when I was thinking about this, I thought, what was it that my teachers saw in me when they kind of disregarded me? They probably thought I was a pretty nice person, but other than that, they knew nothing about me. But that isn't such a bad thing. Anyway, those are, I've been told by my friend Lionel to make sure that I stop and not talk too much. So that's where I'm at in all this, and I'm going to let Lionel take over now.
I think it's fair to say everyone's been enjoying what you've been saying, and just for the record, I would keep listening too.
Yeah, I wish I could. It's driving me nuts, but never mind. I'll be fine.
Okay, good. Just folks, we have a couple minutes for questions here. So if you have a thought, please feel free to drop it into the chat. And now that Kathy has finished presenting, she'll be able to read them along with me. And if a few of them come in, I'll just kind of keep track of them, monitor them. as we go here. So I'm just sort of seeing Shelley's made a comment here. Asked, do my there's. Yeah, I don't know if you have sort of a comment to build on Shelley's comment there. So much is asked of us, and it's a profession where the more we do, the more there is to do, and like there is no, that idea that there is no stop. It's almost like it's unlimited, that what the system will take from us. And I like your comments about taking care of yourself. And I don't know if you want to expand on that a little bit more, because I think all the way through in your book is talking about care and compassion and empathy. And I love that quote about sparkling, trying to get your kids to sparkle. It's just I've never heard that word before, but it's a beautiful word to use in talking about kids in your class.
Well, I've included the poem, which I had in my book, What Do I Do About the Kid Who, which is the bud, reteaching kids their loveliness. But just to speak to the issue, so much of it is asked of us. And then what happens is that we become the people who are the equity people, or, we understand this, so we're given even more work to do. So I think the idea of getting people to help you, and my work with mentorship is not, I don't have a huge amount of it, but I do know that you need to find a mentor who's going to support you, but isn't going to just tell you you're doing great. You're doing great. You need someone who's going to actually, look at your work and, give you some ways to cut corners if you have to, in order to get yourself more time. But, a really good critical friend. And I think that's important. Okay. Should I keep, Lionel's supposed to be the guy.
No, this is great. Yeah, no. I was going to take you down the critical friend path, but I think Claire's made and had Tina as sort of agreed. It's a great question. So maybe we can take a look at, can you speak to the new thinking around the writing in the role in adopting the point of view of marginalized characters when the writer does not belong to that community? I realize that's a big question for a webinar, but I mean, if there's some initial thoughts that from your experience, you could bring to that, I think folks would appreciate it.
Adopting the point of view of marginalized characters when the writer does not belong to that community. Are you talking about the author?
I think that's what Claire is talking about there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Writing. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Well, my feeling, my work around writing and role is, the character.
The character. Okay.
I have a very strong rule about writing and role. I'm just gonna, here it goes. First of all, I never ever in my classroom ever have the kids play the racist, the oppressor, or the oppressor. Ever. And, my drama friends go nuts with me about that. Oh, but we're all in role. It doesn't matter. I don't want that voice heard. So I only have them write as either the supporter of the oppressed or of the oppressed. However, if they write as the person who is oppressed, you cannot write in role unless you've had an experience of being interviewed, of being heard in role, spoken word, so that you actually have something to say, so that you are not silent. I mean, we could do a whole thing on this.
Totally. Oh yeah.
It's people have kids write in perspective. That's not writing in role. Writing in role is we have all been in the classroom. We've all had a chance to meet this outsider, to listen to her story, to have a chance to see her life as it is unfolding, to have her speak to us, and then she can write. But you can't write if she hasn't had a chance to be in the spot.
That makes sense. Great. Good. Thank you. There's 3 or 4 big ones coming up from Lara and Allison and Valeri. The one that maybe I'll just start with, and we'll see how we are for time, because it's not necessarily everyone, but it is a good question from Allison around wondering if you have any thoughts of the role of the supply teacher or the teacher on call for creating that caring and equitable classroom when it's not your classroom. Right? I think whether you have a full-time job or you're just starting or you are a supply teacher, you can completely understand that question. Like, you're walking into someone else's room and their rules. Is there any sort of tips you've seen, or people navigating that very difficult situation?
Well, there is an amazing Pembroke author that Mary needs to, if she's needs to, I've forgotten her name right at the moment, but who does work around supply teaching. And but I have done a bit of supply teaching myself, and I think the idea is it's important to come in and listen first.
Yeah.
Amanda Ewell. Thanks, Mary. I think it's important to get the gauge of the classroom and not be the person who just comes in and does games and activities. Because if you're going to do the kinds of games and activities that I'm talking about, you kind of need to know where they fit with the kids that you're working with. And as a supply teacher, you don't know who they are. You don't know the history or the culture of that school, of that classroom. So, I think one of the ways that I would begin is, bring a book. I know that it might not be the lesson plan, but maybe you begin the day with a book, or a novel, or the excerpt from a novel, or you tell your own personal story or whatever.
Great. Good. This is an interesting one. And I don't think you sort of talked about it. And of course, your book, it's hard to connect to the new reality that we have. But there's a question around, can you speak about translating the culturally responsive activities to a remote format and building community? And that may be another webinar. So I'm just saying that you can't answer all that quickly.
Valerie Zatzman, my colleague from York, right. And she and I will be figuring this out together. That's my next job, is to figure out how do I take, this kind of work, these stories about, personal storytelling. How do I have them talk about their identities in chat rooms and then come back? How do I ensure that it's safe? I think this is a whole new bailiwick that we're in, and we're going to, the terrible truth is we're going to make mistakes, because, it is going to happen. That's why I think you have to, before you even begin this work with your students, you've got to say, I'm a learner with you, and we have to develop this together. And the last thing I want is for us to hurt each other. So how do we do this? And Valerie, you and I will have to figure this out. We all will.
I totally agree. Yeah. It's going to be an interesting year in many ways, but that is definitely one of them. Yeah.
These students that I'm teaching from the Royal Conservatory of Music, they're not even bringing them back from their countries. So, they're going to be in China, Russia, Czechoslovakia, Ireland,
Yeah, don't even worry about time zones, Yeah.
I'll be in my jammies. There's a thought.
There's a thought. Yeah. But you might be in New Brunswick, will be nice. So, that's great. Yeah. Well, I'm just looking at the time, folks, and we're sort of at the end of our time. So maybe, Kathy, just before I leave the last word to you, just to be on behalf of everyone today, thank you so much for the session. It was great. Clearly, you've made an impact on people. We've seen comments about how your work has guided them in their practice, that you've been a mentor for them, that they've been in your class, and what you're doing now and what you've done in the past clearly has translated into classrooms all across Canada. So thank you for that. Thank you for today. It's been great to have you spend a half an hour, 45 minutes with us. And I'll just leave you with the last word to say goodbye to everyone.
Yeah, I mean, there's the Galway Canal poem in my book that I love so much, and of course, I don't have my book here, but it's coming. It's going to be in the on a truck delivered here soon. But it's the idea that the bud stands for all things, and sometimes it's important to put your hand on the brow of a flower and tell it in words how lovely it is so that it re-blossoms again from within of self-blessing. And I do think that the way in which we teach children is a blessing, that they do blossom. And we cannot forget that we have that capacity, that teachers make all the difference in the world to these children, that they feel safe with you, they understand you, they know you are going to fight for them, and that you are going to reteach their loveliness not only to themselves, but to the rest of the kids in the school. That's our job.